Welcome back and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Yes, it's one of the biggest weeks for football is finally here, week 12. But first, before we get to that, we got to look back on week 11, recap all the craziness that has happened. And there's tons of talk about to get you guys right. Talk about the matchups that happened, talk about how they're going to look, faces outlook, and then get you prepared for week 12, especially with some waivers that you have to pick up, and then just making sure you work your way around the holiday. So as always, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and I will see you here after the intro. Welcome back in, everyone. This is TwinTakes Fantasy Football, and I am so glad to be with you on one of the craziest weeks of the NFL season. I know it is a holiday and you all are with your family, but that doesn't mean that we can stop working here and stop giving you fantasy advice, because now we are so down into the actual crux of the fantasy season where a lot of people are making push for the fantasy playoffs, trying to get in, trying to secure a spot, trying to push for that overall number one seed for those buys. So this is as busy as it gets. This is as important as it gets. So we will not relax until you guys have won your championships and getting you all the information you need here from TwinTakes. So with that being said, let's jump into our headlines that we always so lovely recap. So again, already said happy Thanksgiving, but I want to make sure you guys well aware that with 3 games on Thanksgiving, with it being Thanksgiving on Thursday, there's going to be 3 games. So make sure you are setting your lineups accordingly. With that being said, you always get those reminders from the Sleeper.App. I'm always going to plug Sleeper since I work with them to move any Thursday night games into out of your flex spots so you can keep those flexible. Now there are 3 games on Thursday, so make sure that all the players that are involved on the Thursday slate of games are in your primary wide receiver spots, primary running back spots. So when you get to Sunday and there's some late game inactives, then you can go ahead and be flexible and move your players around. This is only going to get crazier and crazier as the years go on. Not this year, but I know that Amazon has been in talks about adding a Black Friday game potentially next year. So this is going to be an absolutely crazy week for football. We're going to have to deal with football on Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that this year. But again, just be aware of how many players are playing super early and get them set your lineups early. Set them before you start eating turkey and pass out, and make sure they're all out of your flex spots. So with that housekeeping item addressed, let's move into our second headline, which is going to be the Eagles, a team that has been so dominant. Have they been exposed? Are they mortal? No, every team is mortal. This is what makes NFL football so great. There's so much parity across the league. And I was thinking about maybe that there's a way to get certain exposure. We saw the way that the Commanders with Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, nickel and dime the Eagles to death last week and absolutely controlled the time of possession, had 2-1 time of possession over the Eagles, went ahead and absolutely ran it down their throats and controlled the ball. And, I wasn't able to watch the game in person just based on where my cable is, but given that this is a fairly heavy run dominant team with Jonathan Taylor, the Fantasy 101, maybe the Indianapolis Colts took a note out of the Commanders book and, tried to do the same thing, exploited them the same way. Going into the stats, they actually passed the ball more than they ran the ball. The time of possession was fairly split, about 30 minutes and 36 seconds for the Colts and 29 minutes and change for the Eagles. So they didn't control time of possession. They didn't run the ball. They didn't run an ungodly amount of more run plays versus the Eagles than pass plays. They actually attacked them through the air, and it was just a very poor game for the Eagles secondary that was come to be very staunch in the first 8 weeks of the season. And what we can kind of chalk this up to is that, again, there's a ton of injuries. We've seen them lose Dallas Goedert. It's really impacted their offense. They've lost Jordan Davis in the middle. It's kind of impacted their defense. This is just the lull that a lot of teams experience. I'm not going to freak out on the Eagles. I'm not going to panic. I still think they are a top 3 team in the NFL. but it's just one of those things where, the burdens of a season kind of take their toll. This is one of the healthiest teams through 8 weeks. They had 17 starters for the first 8 games, which was the most by far of any NFL team. So sometimes those things just catch up with you, and I think they're going to have to deal with injuries and deal with fatigue going forward. And, this is a midseason lull. They'll bounce back. They'll get some urgency, and I think they will figure it out. So don't worry too much. The thing I want to talk about is going to be that Justin Fields injury. Again, another stellar performance from the second-year quarterback up in Chicago, but he ends the game with a pretty terrible shoulder injury. We saw it lead to a pretty awful pick and some pretty terrible decision making. So we'll have to see what he kind of goes through the week looking like, how practice comes out. There's so much concern around it just because he said he was in quite a bit of pain going forward, and it's not on his throwing arm, but again, any radial pain that comes across his body, into his back, into his neck, like these are just, again, your body is one fluid system. It's all connected. Any pain anywhere is going to impact, it's going to take your mind away from what you should be doing. If you're considering a pain over in your left shoulder, it's going to take away from your mechanics on the right shoulder, take away from your decision making and looking and perceiving what's in front of you. So it'll be interesting to see how this young man reacts to the injury, how he deals with it, how he copes with it, and then I want to see what the actual scope of the injury is going to be. He does play a pretty tough defense in the New York Jets coming up, so it would be a good test regardless. But something that, watch the injury reports, and if he is limited in practice, maybe I'm trying to find a backup option just in case. Number 4, a team that I want to highlight that I'm really, really fading right now is the Ravens' continued struggles. This is a team that just hasn't looked right since the multitude of injuries to Mark Andrews, since Rashad Bateman went down for the year with re-aggravating that foot injury from last year. They've completely changed their identity. They were a pretty balanced offensive attack in the first few weeks of the season, but since they lost so many of their offensive weapons in the pass game, they've shifted to a game script that favors the run plays to pass plays almost 2-1. They're coming very predictable. They're coming very slow, very methodical. They're not utilizing some of the things that make Lamar Jackson. And we saw them struggle and toil away with the Panthers, who are one of the worst teams in the NFL. I don't know if they just have the offensive firepower to keep pace with some of the other juggernauts like the Buffalo Bills, like the Miami Dolphins, like the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is, again, a team that also experienced a lot of aggression, especially in the secondary. Marcus Williams out for the year. There's a big off-season free agent signing. Kyle Hamilton is experiencing the rookie doldrums of any rookie DB. We're seeing Marcus Peters have some regression in his play as he kind of goes on through the years. So this is a team that I want to highlight as a team that I'm kind of straying away from. Like, maybe you play Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, but it's hard for me to kind of go to find, like, oh yeah, DeMarcus Robinson, I want to play him. Oh yeah, Kenyon Drake, even in a good match, I want to play him. So last and certainly not least, just on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm going to leave you off with a high note here, because we always want the high notes on the holidays here. That, in my opinion, for my money, Chiefs are undoubtedly the best team in the NFL. We saw them get it done against the Chargers on Sunday night. They lost Kadarius Toney to injury. Juju was out. Mecole Hardman was out, and they still managed to absolutely eviscerate this Chargers defense. They can break you down on the ground. Isaiah Pacheco looks very, very fluid on the ground, very explosive, has quite a bit of burst. They actually brought Clyde Edwards-Helaire back into the fold a little bit, used him a little bit more. Jerick McKinnon looks really good. Don't know where he's been for the past 5 years, but somehow Andy Reid has unlocked him. Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. Enough said there. He had 32.5 points. We're going to highlight him in the stud section later. But even without Tyreek Hill, the maturity that Patrick Mahomes is showing right now in the offense is off the charts. He's going out and finding 4, 5, 6 different ways to beat up these different teams, and that offense looks unstoppable right now. That's just in my opinion. So I'm going to plan on seeing them well into the end of January. So that's going to wrap up our headlines here. Let's go ahead and talk about our studs, and we got to start it off with Travis Kelce. He won a lot of us our weeks this week, including myself, with that 32.5 performance. Had 3 touchdowns, absolutely insane. Yeah, it probably did help that Juju McCole missed the game. Juju and McCole missed the game, and then obviously Kadarius Toney left the game early with a groin injury. But the dude is just special. Even into his 30s at tight end. There's no one that moves like him, no one that catches the ball like him, no one that has the connection with Patrick Mahomes like him. Patrick Mahomes is a one generational talent, throwing him the ball. All these things make Travis Kelce one of the best tight ends in football, and not even the best tight end, just one of the best players in football, and definitely a insane advantage to anyone who has him going into this final stretch of fantasy run. Number 2, we're going to highlight Davante Adams for the second week in a row. 29.6 points, finds the end zone 2 times. Obviously has that walk-off touchdown in overtime versus the Broncos, a guy that I thought wasn't going to actually come out and perform pretty well given how stout this Broncos defense was, but manages to dice them up. The Raiders have certainly had their struggles, but Davante Adams is still one of the top receivers in the NFL and continues, even on this abysmal team, to show how much talent he has and continues to get it done for fantasy. A guy that I am so happy to finally be on this team is Najee Harris, a guy that most people took in the first round, ended the first round. A lot of high hopes for him. Had an amazing rookie campaign last year, but just couldn't get it done. And we don't know if this was due to the 28th ranked offense in the for the Pittsburgh Steelers, whether this was, just him regressing and not having confidence, whether it's from dealing with that foot injury in preseason, whatever it was, he was having trouble, but he finds the end zone twice. He gets involved in the pass game. They seem to be maturing. Obviously, Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in the NFL. They're going to find a way to get him involved, and he has 25.6 fantasy points. Absolutely incredible work by Najee here. I know a lot of people, including myself, were happy to see that. Number 4, obviously, Amari Cooper. Buffalo defense is touted as top 5 in the league. No one saw the Amari Cooper and Jacoby Brissett and these Browns coming in and actually challenging them, and it was pretty tight through the first half. And Amari Cooper just kept beating them downfield, beating Jordan Poyer, and just taking advantage of a lot of these DBs. Maybe they were shaken up with the whole Snowmageddon thing that happened in Buffalo. There were last-second venue change out to Detroit, a lot of this other stuff. But Amari Cooper, whatever it was, took advantage of that, slung the rock against them. Incredible fantasy game from Amari at 27.3 points. And last but not least, we got to highlight the running back 1 in the Cowboys backfield, which is none other than Tony Pollard. 33.9 points. Receiving touchdowns, check. Rushing touchdowns, check. Leads the team in both receiving yards and pass and rush yards, check and check. This dude is unbelievable. I think everyone and their mother knows that he is by far and away one of the best Cowboys weapons on their offense, and way better than Zeke, except for Jerry Jones. Just Jerry Jones never going to put him over Zeke. As long as Tony Pollard continues to be utilized in this offense, we saw how dynamic the Cowboys offense can be, how good he is, how he drives them to actually winning football, which is important for in the NFL. So looks like Tony Pollard is going to be a very, very fantasy relevant asset, and also a very relevant asset for the Cowboys as they try to, usurp some of those playoff demons that they've experienced in recent weeks. Let's get into some honorable mentions now. David Montgomery. Without Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery stepped up and took a huge workload out of the backfield for the Bears. Comes in with 19.6 points. Absolutely amazing. Should be yet another league-winning guy, as he does every single year. Daniel Jones, 24.6 points. A guy, especially with a lot of guys on waivers. He was playing the Detroit defense, and we do look for these matchups to take advantage of. I don't think this says anything about Daniel Jones as a perennial fantasy asset, as a perennial quarterback for the Giants. I still have a feeling they might move off from him after this year. But again, this just shows you we can take advantage of very juicy matchups like the Detroit Lions. T. Higgins obviously stepped up in the absence of Jamar Chase, 19.3 points. Absolutely getting it done against the 32nd ranked pass defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joshua Palmer, 26.6 points, finding the end zone twice. First on that 51-yard bomb from Justin Herbert. We saw that Mike Williams was in the game for a little bit, then he left after re-aggravating that high ankle sprain. Keenan Allen was on a pitch count coming back in, and Joshua Palmer, he is that dude. He's proven time and time again that he can shoulder that wide receiver 1 burden. So this is a very, very exciting prospect for the Chargers, having Joshua Palmer, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen for their roster going forward. George Pickens, this one's got me a little hot and bothered just because I predicted this coming into this week. If you go look at my sleeper videos, I absolutely predicted this is a George Pickens week, and Deontay Johnson, I was fading him quite a bit, and my predictions for George Pickens and Deontay Johnson turned out almost absolutely spot on. I believe that a lot of the stats that we research over here at TwinTakes and put into our sleeper videos and these videos here is really materialized materialized into fantasy points. And this is a great example of taking into account certain stats like yards after catch, like ADOT, stuff like that most people don't really consider, and trying to turn it into fantasy production and fantasy wins for you guys. That's why we're here, for you. So moving on, Austin Eckler, pretty ho-hum week at 17 points for him. Gets it done on the air, through the air and through the ground. But, very good to see him. Very good to have 17 points considered to be a ho-hum week after his very poor start to the season. Derrick Henry obviously started out many people's weeks on Thursday on the right foot, scoring passing touchdown, rushing touchdown. The dude almost had the trifecta, the same as Christian McCaffrey a couple weeks before. Again, most people consider him to be the best running back in the NFL, and he's backing it up against this pretty poor Green Bay defense. The Titans are for real. The Packers are not. Mahomes, 27.5. He's just really good at football. Joe Burrow, 26.7. Do we expect anything less from this young phenom? Again, took the Bengals to the Super Bowl last year, and he absolutely diced up this 32nd ranked pass defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, this was, if he didn't get this many points, I would have been concerned. Jalen Hurts, 24.2 points, and this is important to highlight just because I'm looking at a guy that had an absolutely horrible performance. The team only put up 17 points. They were struggling against a Colts team that's generally been one of the worst in football, and even with a ton of busts on every single side of the Eagles, Jalen Hurts still puts up 24.2 points. It just shows how special he is for fantasy, that even in a bad performance, even in a lackluster offensive game, even in a game that hits the under, Jalen Hurts is still going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks for fantasy. It's just unreal what he does with his legs and how he can continue to provide that fantasy production. Jamal Williams, 24.4 points. I did want to put him in the highlight section, but we've highlighted him so many times here. Got to put him in the runner-up section. Finds the end zone 3 times, is clearly the goal line back for the Detroit Lions, and I guess Dan Campbell just trusts him. He is the running back one. It's not the fact that he's a goal line back. He's a backup back to DeAndre Swift. He is the RB1 in that Lions offense, and anyone who is able to snag him off waivers has a truly special asset for the fantasy playoff run. Chris Olave, 18.7 points, just super good. I know there's a lot of question about who is the best rookie wide receiver coming out of this class. As of right now, I got to give it to Chris Olave. He is absolutely killing it. My preseason pick and guy that I went after hard was Drake London. Not looking as good right now. I still believe he has a ton of talent, but look at Chris Olave. Dude is a beast, and I think he's going to be around for a long time. And then we got to highlight our Monday night game. We had George Kittle with 22.4 points, finding the end zone twice, and Deebo Samuel, 18.9 points, getting back to what he does, 39-yard scamper to the end zone. These are the 49ers that we had seen last year, the ones that took a lot of people to the fantasy playoffs and fantasy championships. So good to see them kind of get right, and a lot of fantasy production after a couple down weeks from both Deebo and George Kittle. That's going to wrap up our stud section. A lot of recaps there and a lot of hopefully players that you can target. I know this is fantasy trade deadlines for a lot of people, so a lot of those players I mentioned, you can go ahead and target them for your trades going forward. We don't really do a specific trade show here. Maybe something to look into in the future. But now I got to talk about our duds. Justin Jefferson. Time to highlight him with 4.8 points. That was an absolute dud of a game all around with every Minnesota Viking. We can also put in Dalvin Cook here as well. He only had 7.2 points in a half PPR scoring format. They were blown out from the absolute get-go by the Cowboys. I don't know. It wasn't really even primetime Kirk Cousins. It was an afternoon game, but it was a home game for the Vikings, but everything just went wrong from the start. Kirk Cousins, we're also going to see him a little bit lower on this list. He had 2.2 points, could not get anything going. I don't know what happened to this Vikings offense that had just been so good. They upset the Bills. They had a very gutty win against the Commanders, who are 4-1 in the past 5 games. They had all the momentum going for them, and they just hit a brick wall in the Cowboys. I don't know what this says about the Cowboys as much as it says about the Vikings and how inconsistent they are. But I hope this is more of a speed bump rather than, the actual path forward for this team. But yeah, I mean, they pulled their starters after the end of quarter 3. It wasn't even a game. Nothing could get going. It was just brutal all around. And as a rookie head coach, Kevin O'Connell has a lot of things to figure out. Damian Pierce, 2.7 points. I mean, he struggled to come out early. Finally, Lovey entrusted him with a lot of work, and he was absolutely insane for fantasy football. That's just because they had, Brandon Cooks was out with injury and with personal issues. They just had they didn't have any other running backs. There was just no one else for him to shoulder the load, and he was taking 25 touches per game. Like, he was just getting an insane amount of work. I think they finally realized that was not going to be feasible going forward. They signed Eno Benjamin off of waivers after he was cut by the Cardinals. I think that this is obviously a speed bump more than the actual norm for Damian Pierce, but he did hit a pretty stout defense in the Commanders' run defense. That they're getting Chase Young back. They got Montez Sweat. They got a lot of guys on there that make this defense pretty good. Just was a bad game for the Texans all around. And he will get back to normal, but just not as some of the highs that we've seen with, week 5, 6, 7. Saquon Barkley, this was a bad game. This Detroit Lions team has really turned things around. Their defense is absolutely night and day from the defense that we saw coming to start the season. They absolutely shut down the run with Saquon Barkley, 4.5 points. Nothing to be concerned about here. Saquon Barkley is by far and away the number one running back in fantasy right now. If we had to redraft our teams, at this point today, even after looking at Saquon's 4.5 game against the Detroit Lions, I'm going to go and just say he's a 101 pick. Clearly, he's so good. He's such a heart and soul of that team, especially with Wanda Robinson going out of the injury. That means even more work is going to go through Saquon Barkley's hands. He's absolutely insane, and it's just a very unfortunate game script that happened, and a lot of the offense was ineffective. A lot of the touchdowns went to Daniel Jones. They went elsewhere. They were taken out of Saquon's hands. They were put in a very unfavorable game script for the run game. So that's just happened with Saquon Barkley, but no concerns there. And finally, Michael Carter. What can we say about the Jets, dude? Like, there's so much wrong with the Jets. Let's not even get into Zach Wilson's press conference where he doesn't take any accountability. He now probably will get benched going into week 12. Joe Flacco might be the starter going forward. And it's just tons of uncertainty in a team that was looking so promising, that had a playoff position, and now they were doing so well with rushing the ball. Obviously, the injury to Breece Hall hurts, but they have Michael Carter. They traded for James Robinson, guys that I think are very capable of running backs. Hopefully, they can really re-solidify their identity through the run game. They can find a quarterback who's going to be accountable. Maybe Zach Wilson can have an epiphany or come to Jesus meeting. But this again is a team that they seem to struggle against the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick seems to have the Jets number no matter who's at quarterback, no matter who's coaching that team. So maybe this is just the demons of New England, but there's a lot of bad things from that game that make me really worried going forward. Some honorable mentions, going to talk about A.J. Brown, 6.5 points. We talked about how bad that Eagles game was. Again, just the lulls with all the injuries. D'Onta Foreman, 2.4 points. This guy is just way too inconsistent. His only top 10 fantasy performances against Atlanta. So a guy that I was willing to take a risk on, but now that he's so inconsistent and can't do it against anyone else except Atlanta, I'm very, very out on D'Onta Foreman now. Mike Williams, 2.2. Got to highlight him because he tried to come back super early from that high ankle sprain. Re-aggravated it. Should be out for another 2 to 3 weeks. Sorry, Mike. Hopefully we'll get you back in time for fantasy playoffs. Talked about Dalvin Cook already. Drake London. Dude was looking so good. First drive, finds the end zone, touchdown, 6.7 points. Doesn't get a single catch the rest of the game. Well, he actually did get a catch, but it was called back on some penalties. But unfortunately, Kyle Pitts now goes down with an MCL tear. Drake London hopefully gets more involved in the pass game. But again, with Arthur Smith, Cordell Patterson, and Tyler Algier, how often are we actually going to see this this pass game materialize for the Falcons? Nick Chubb, 8.2 points. Just a tough matchup against that Bills front seven that was, Boogie Basham, Ed Oliver, Von Miller, just an absolutely stout front seven. Absolutely stout front seven that's hard to run on, and no fault of Nick Chubb's in and of himself. They're making things work in the pass game with Amari Cooper. No need for Nick Chubb, especially trying to run through that brick wall. Tyler Boyd, again, another disappointing week for Tyler Boyd. It's hard for me to come back to this well saying he's a starting caliber wide receiver. If he was on any other team, he'd be the wide receiver too. With Jamar Chase out, his production is going to increase, and it's been 2 weeks that he let us down, 5.2 weeks. I don't know what's really going on. Garrett Wilson, 2.2 points. Again, Zach Wilson is completely incapable of throwing the ball or leading an offense right now, and until we get a better quarterback in, honestly, the best thing for Garrett Wilson is if Joe Flacco takes over quarterback the rest of the season. Otherwise, I would just sit him. Deontay Johnson, 4.2. Deontay Johnson is just really bad this season. He leads the team in drops. He His passer rating for passes targeted to Deontay is like 48.7%. It is ridiculously low. His catch percentage is like 50% or less than 50% as well. Like, it's just really bad. That's Deontay Johnson having the statistically worst season of his career. I would not bother with Deontay Johnson going forward. Adam Thielen, another product of that abysmal Vikings game that we much sooner rather forget. David Njoku, 2.7 points. Again, you're really pressed for tight ends right now with all the injuries. 2 Waller, 2 Goddard, 2 Pitts. But, and Njoku, you'd hope to see him a little bit more productive. But again, you see Watson back next week, or this coming week. So let's see what happens to this Browns offense with Watson under center instead of Jacoby Brissett. Cole Kmet, again, sometimes he gets dragged to greatness by Justin Fields. Sometimes Justin Fields' ego is just too big and he only takes himself there. Unfortunately, Cole Kmet was not dragged with him. There's a bunch of rushing touchdowns by Justin Fields this past week, which again limits Cole Kmet's upside. When they're attacking on the ground, when David Montgomery is getting involved, obviously it limits the passing game. Cole Kmet found himself on the opposite side of what he has the past 2 weeks. Joe Mixon, 7.7 points. With TJ Watt coming back to the lineup for the Pittsburgh Steelers, makes this run defense, so much more stout. So no surprise here. Joe Mixon can't all have 50-point weeks, but a little bit frustrating against this Pittsburgh defense. But again, it's a divisional game. It's going to be pretty gritty. I wouldn't be too worried about Joe Mixon going forward. Miles Sanders, again, just a game where they couldn't get anything going on the ground. I think he only ran it like 8 times, so he just wasn't utilized in that game. Hopefully they can, address their injuries, move forward, have a better game script, and kind of get out of this midseason lull for the Eagles. DJ Moore, with Baker at quarterback, he hasn't been better than wide receiver 30 on the week. I would stay away from DJ Moore as long as Baker is the quarterback down there. Dalton Schultz, he's great. The Cowboys are great. They just didn't need him. I mean, CeeDee Lamb had 7 points. Dalton Schultz had 2.7 points. Michael Gallup was ineffective as well. It's because Tony Pollard did absolutely everything, and so did Zeke on the ground. There was no reason to get any of the pass catchers involved. It was immensely a game script that favored the run rather than the pass, so no worries there. Again, he's just talented. No signs of concern. It just wasn't a game script that really favored them. Brian Robinson Jr., 5 points. Not great against this Houston run defense, but again, he looks explosive. He has in 4 fewer games than Antonio Gibson. I mean, he has almost the same number of touches. He has almost the same number of yards. He has almost the same number of broken tackles. Almost the same number of yards after catch. I mean, this dude is special. Give it some time. He's still coming back. He said he's not going to be 100%. Still not 100% from taking 2 gunshot wounds to the leg. So the more time you give him, the better he will be. And we're going to round out our dud section here with 2 guys who disappointed with injury. Obviously, Rondale Moore comes in negative 0.6, had a couple bad beats, had a guy actually start Rondale Moore and he lost by less than a half a point in my redraft league. So that was an absolutely brutal loss. We were actually going ham on it in our group chat earlier. And he's out with a groin injury. See how long that's going to keep him sidelined for. And then obviously Kadarius Toney, Gooses, after there was such hype. I was so hype around him too. Like I was riding the Kadarius Toney hype train. I was the conductor of that hype train. He leaves with absolutely 0.0 points. He screwed me in a couple weeks. But again, these are injuries. You can't predict injuries. I'm not super worried about it going forward. Injuries happen. It's part of fantasy. It's a risk you assume. You address it. You move forward. You'll be better next week. So those are the duds. Now let's go ahead and talk about some crucial waiver pickups for this week. And again, I do want to highlight that don't really worry about waivers too much. If you have Fab, I would probably save Fab this week. Don't reach too much on waivers. Don't burn waiver priority if it carries over. This, again, is a holiday week. It's week 12. It's one of the biggest weeks in the NFL. That means there are no buys this week. You should have your full team, your full roster, a full 16 slate of games to choose from. So no real need to go dumpster diving on the waiver wire this week. So avoid it if you can. But that being said, there's always going to be people who need to pick up and we will highlight them right now. So first and foremost, with Joe Mixon leaving due to concussion, Samaje Perine was heavily involved, especially in the passing game and the running game. He was absolutely insane for the Bengals. So he is a guy, especially if you are the Mixon manager, given how iffy concussion protocol is since Tua 2022, and that whole fun debacle. I would definitely be targeting Samaje Perine as a very safe backup on the waiver wires. Number 2 here going to be Treylon Burks. He missed quite a bit of time with that turf toe, but he comes back, puts up over 100 yards, is heavily involved, highly targeted, looks to be the alpha wide receiver in this offense. It's not Robert Woods. It's not Nick Westbrook-Akine. Now that Treylon Burks has settled in, Ryan Tannehill is utilizing him, is targeting him quite a bit. So if you need a spot start at wide receiver, Treylon Burks is a guy that I think he can mature going down the rest of the season and can win some people some fantasy championships. Number 3 I want to highlight is going to be Nico Collins. I mean, this is a guy that has more targets, more receptions, and more yards than Brandon Cooks. What do you want me to say? He's the number 1 receiving option. He's number 1 receiving option in Houston right now, and we can always find fantasy value on bad teams. Just because a team is bad in offense, this is the same thing we talked about with George Pickens over on Sleeper this past week. If you go check out those videos, we talked about, yes, they're 20th in offensive efficiency, but George Pickens still can provide value. He provided value. Nico Collins, wide receiver 1 in this Texans office. Yes, they are 32nd in offensive efficiency, but you still can find valuable in the wide receiver 1, and that's going to be Nico Collins, not Brandon Cooks. Number 4, a guy that we've highlighted many, many times here on this waiver wire section is going to be Marcus Mariota. He has a very, very strong schedule going forward, and a guy that has proven that he can get it done on the ground, rushes for touchdowns, provides a high rushing floor. And they're a team that's competing for the playoffs. They're going to be playing hard, and Marcus Mariota is playing for a job. He's playing for his career, and I think he's going to continue. He's currently quarterback 8 on the season, so I have full confidence in picking up Marcus Mariota if you do need a spot start at quarterback. And last, and definitely least, really, really dumpster diving here is going to be Demarcus Robinson. And this is just, we're trying to dive into a Ravens pass game. It's on life support right now, but we're trying to find anything to kind of get it going. Demarcus Robinson seems to be that one guy. He had over 100 yards this past week. He had 9 targets. That's even more than Andrews. Deshaun Jackson's out with injury. Gus Edwards is iffy with that hamstring injury. We don't know how much Kenyon Drake will be utilized in this offense. J.K. Dobbins is still on IR. Andrews still is dealing with a multitude of injuries. Rashad Bateman is out. I mean, who else is actually even left? Devin Duvernay, he's been a little bit disappointing. James Prochet is not a starting caliber or an alpha type wide receiver. Demarcus Robinson basically is the last man standing in that offense. He has a ton of targets, and we're just basically saying we're going to play the roulette on if we get the target share, we're going to get enough fantasy points to at least be somewhat relevant going forward. So Demarcus Robinson, last guy. If you are absolutely truly desperate, it's a guy I would pick up, but don't worry about it too much this week. So that's all I have to say. We'll be pushing out a week preview video as we always do here on TwinTakes. It's going to be put up on Wednesday, one day sooner, so you guys don't have to worry about it on Thanksgiving. It'll be before the Thanksgiving slate of games, and so you can watch it prior to enjoying time with your family or drinking, which I know a lot of people use this holiday to be face down in the bottle of liquor. Whichever you prefer. I don't judge here. We're very open and accepting here at TwinTakes. So with that being said, I will see you tomorrow, very, very soon, previewing a lot of the games going forward, and good luck down the stretch, and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Take care.